The Tennis Gambling Podcast on the Sports Game Podcast Network is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. You can win 100x on your entry with Underdog Fantasy Pick'em. Sign up with the promo code SGPN to claim your special pick and a first-time deposit offer up to $250 in bonus cash. Underdog Fantasy promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by the Mega Memorial Day merch sale. 15% off everything in the SGPN merch store with the promo code SGPN May. And welcome, everybody, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast on the Sports Game Podcast Network. It is currently late Saturday night, roughly 11 p.m. Eastern Time on May 25th, the second, or technically third episode of the day. We had an episode for the final in Lyon, we had a preview episode for the Women's French Open a couple hours ago, so check out that episode. And now it is time to officially cover the Men's French Open. So we're going to cover that and get into the quarter odds as well as our outright picks for wrapping up the show with the lock and dog picks. However, before we get into any of that, do want to quickly remind everyone once again to like, subscribe on YouTube. Also a reminder to rate and review the podcast on Spotify or Apple. And a reminder that we have a lot of great overall merch on the SGPN merch store, including content from the Tennis Gambling Podcast. We have shirts, sweatshirts, high quality. Recommend you checking that out. To go through the actual other shows, briefly want to talk about how there's a lot of great racing going on this week. And one of our featured shows of the week is going to be the NASCAR Gambling Podcast and the F1 Gambling Podcast, because you have the Indy 500, you have the Monaco Grand Prix, and the Coke 600 all happening in the same week. And Rod and Cody from the NASCAR Gambling Podcast and the F1 Gambling Podcast have you covered. Make sure to join their Kyle Larson diecast car giveaway. That's free to enter. Just go to sportsgamepodcast.com/race to register, and make sure to subscribe to the NASCAR Gambling Podcast and the F1 Gambling Podcast. And we also have a lot of great content once again on the merch store, and we have a great promo going on right now for Memorial Day. We have a Mega Memorial Day merch sale, 15% of everything in the merch store, promo code SGPN May. So quickly getting into the actual recap of what happened last episode. I know we covered on the women's episode, but we'll recap it once again because we are actually going to cover the final matches that happened in Geneva and in Lyon. Mentioned it in passing in the women's episode, but we'll go into more depth here for this episode. Starting off with the lock and dog, once again, ended up splitting. We had the easy lock with Perricard over half a break at minus 170. If we're laying over 160, it means I feel really, really good about it, and I cashed easily. Insane number. Echeverry's been broken now in, I believe, 28 of his 31 matches this season, or maybe 29 of his 31 matches. Point is, he gets broken all the time, and half a break against Echeverry was an absolute gift. So nice winner there. Heartbreaker, though, on the no tie breaks, because we needed one hold from Perricard as he was up 6-5 in the final set, had two very makeable volleys, punted them, and handed the break over before eventually winning in a breaker. So a bit of a heartbreak there for the dog, but ended up winning the lock easily. So that hopefully that ended up making up for it. As for the outrights, ended up winning in Geneva. We had Ruud to win his third Geneva title at plus 333, which got there. And to briefly recap the actual matches that took place on Saturday, to start off with the Ruud match, very impressive day from Ruud because he got off to a horrible start in the early match. They had to continue the semifinal, or I should say start the semifinal very, very early in the morning, like 4:30 a.m. early in the morning. And he lost the first set 6-1. So you kind of thought he was in trouble. Then he woke up and ended up winning the second set 6-1. And then the third set was very competitive because the third set turned out to go to a breaker. In fact, you're actually looking at the scoreline, and Ruud had to fight off a match point. It was 4-5, and Caboli did have a break point to make the final at 30-40. Ruud fought it off, and then he eventually won in a breaker. So good win for Ruud, helped cash us a plus 333 outright, and he did win his third Geneva title. So congrats to him, and a very impressive running overall showing by him, winning two matches in one day. So good job by him. In the final against Makic, he fell behind early, and then he ended up coming back as he won in straight sets. Good event for Makic, but unfortunately, Ruud was a bit too solid with his overall clay skills, and Makic went down swinging. He tried, but just unfortunately was not able to get the job done. As for Lyon, you had the match of the day, because as good as the Caboli match was, I think the Perricard match was better against Echeverry. You had a very back-and-forth match early. Echeverry was up a break immediately in the first set. Then Perricard broke Echeverry, I believe, in back-to-back service games to win the first set 6-4. Then Echeverry buried him in the second set, winning it 6-1. And at that point, you kind of figured Echeverry had momentum. Perricard was still young. He was going to fold. And he did not. He did fold to screw us out of the no tiebreak bet, but the point is Echeverry did have a very, very tough service game in the 5-5 spot, and then he ended up getting broken. He had 2 game points, fought off 2 break points, but eventually ended up allowing the break on the third opportunity to Perricard. Then you ended up having Perricard blowing 2 volleys in the 6-5 game to give up the break back, and you ended up seeing Etcheverry and Perricard kind of have a choke-off in the breaker where both guys looked extremely tight and both guys were making unforced errors, but eventually Perricard got the job done. Etcheverry did have a match point at 7-6 in the breaker, but unfortunately for him, Perricard bombed a serve out wide, and it was a phenomenal serve, unreturnable. And then the same thing happened on the following point, as Perricard was able to hit 2 big serves when he needed them, and then he eventually got the mini break to win the match. So Etcheverry still has 0 ATP titles. This one's a heartbreaker. Going to stay with him for a while. Perricard, though, at the age of 20, just won his first ATP title. So congrats to him. I was trying to think of how to compare his overall skill set. I think I said Tsonga in the last episode. The more that I thought about it and the more that I actually watched him play, I think it's a better version of Eubanks. I see similarities, and it's not just the one-handed backhand and the solid serve. I think stylistically they're pretty similar. I think Perricard's better, but I do think you can make an argument that both guys are pretty similar in terms of skill set and style. So just keep that in mind. Either way, though, point is a good win for Perricard winning a title, good win for Ruud winning a title, and good win for us having Ruud at plus 333. Now it's time to get into the actual preview of the French Open on the men's side. Same format as the women's tournament. Going to go through the quarter odds for each quarter, mention my picks, then we'll get into the outrights to win the event. Then we'll end up getting into the lock and dog picks for round 1 at the end of the show as the lock and dog picks. So starting off, before we get into any of the preview, do want to remind you once again that we are brought to you by Underdog Fantasy because the NBA playoffs are here. You had a crazy Game 3 Eastern Conference Finals tonight where Boston came back and won. And our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy, wants to make it a lot more interesting because they have a lot of great options to make viewing sports more interesting. They have the Pick'em game, which is simple selecting a higher or lower and player stats like points, rebounds, assists, and so much more. It's the easiest place to play fantasy sports, and you can also make entries of all basketball or mix and match across your favorite sports. You can win up to 100x, and it is a ton of fun. Underdog's available in 30-plus states, including California, Texas, and even Canada. They also have a lot of great options for tennis. They have breaks of serve, aces, double faults, a lot of fun ways to make tennis more interesting. And they also have a lot of great promos for the NBA playoffs, bonus cash airdrops, specials, giveaways, and more. So make sure to follow @OnDogPicks on Twitter. Keep an eye out. It's available in 30-plus states, including California, Texas, and Canada. They also just launched Champions, their player versus player format in Florida. Sign up with the promo code SGPN to claim your special pick and a first-time deposit offer up to $50 in bonus cash. Underdog Fantasy, promo code SGPN. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished recapping Saturday's action. Now it's time to get into the actual French Open on the men's side. Starting off with the recent winners. I'm not going to tell you much, but I got to at least mention it. Nadal and Djokovic have been very good here in the past in pretty much their careers. Djokovic beat Ruud last year in straight sets. Nadal beat Ruud in straight sets the year prior. Djokovic had the 2-set comeback against Tsitsipas as he won in 5, and Nadal beat Djokovic the year prior. So point is, Nadal and Djokovic have won the last 4 French Opens. If you want to actually dig deeper, Nadal's won this event 14 times, and Djokovic has won it 3 times. So the veterans have dominated this event, but this year, probably not going to be the case. Nadal, we know, is up there in years. He's looked very underwhelming health-wise all season long, and he has a draw from hell as he got matched up against Zverev in the first round. So not exactly a good overall, I'd say, outlook for Nadal in this event. We'll see if he can prove the doubters wrong, but he's not going to win the event. I just feel like physically he won't be able to hold up 3 to 5 sets for 2 weeks straight. I just don't see that happening. But I do think that maybe, knock on wood, he can make the match interesting in the first round against Zverev. We'll see what happens, but point is, Nadal is going to have a hard time of winning it a 15th time. I don't want to call it impossible, but the odds are definitely stacked against him. Djokovic's draw is actually decent, but unfortunately for him, he's been terrible this year. Ended up losing to Makic in the semifinals in Geneva, and he lost 6-1 in the final set, but he's been a mess. No titles this year for Djokovic, which might be the latest into a year he's not won a title in probably a decade and change. He's been awful. So we'll see what happens with Djokovic, but the point is it's definitely not looking like he's going to be able to go on a dream run in the French Open, but, maybe he can prove us wrong. He's done, I'd say, insane. He's been able to achieve insane feats before, but I don't see this being one of them. Anyway, time to get into the actual quarter picks, starting off with the Djokovic quarter. You have Djokovic at minus 110. A reminder, by the way, that we do have different lines and different books to shop around and try to find the best lines that you can. So getting into the actual first quarter, Djokovic is minus 110. Ruud is plus 250. A reminder, Ruud did win the last head-to-head meeting on clay. Fritz is 12-1. Paul's 14-1, Musetti's 20-1, Echeverry's 25-1, Cerundolo's 30-1, Lajovic is 40-1, and I'm not really going to go through anybody else. So the question is, am I taking Djokovic at minus 110 or am I fading him? I'm going to fade him. I think minus 110 is a bad price. We've seen him get upset by the likes of Makic, by Nardi. He's been really, really underwhelming, and he's lost to guys that he would normally beat. Now, I know Djokovic is older, so expecting him to regress over time is natural, but he also switched coaches, so it does seem like there's a bit more going on behind the scenes, which has me skeptical to actually trust Djokovic to make a solid showing in this event. I'm not saying he's going to get upset early, but he might. It would not totally shock me. He's definitely vulnerable, and for that reason, I'm not going to pick him at minus 110. I'm not going to pick many options, though, because I don't trust Fritz. I don't trust Paul. I think instead I am going to go with Ruud at plus 250. Yes, I know he might be fatigued after winning a title on Saturday, but I do think that he is a proven commodity at the French Open, even though he did lose the last two finals to Djokovic and Nadal. That does mean he's still made back-to-back French Open finals, so he did win his quarter in the French Open at least 2 straight years. So I do know that he's capable of making deep runs in the French Open. He might self-destruct later in the event, but I do think plus 250 for a guy that beat Djokovic in the head-to-head on clay in the last meeting is a good deal. So I think the only pick I'm going to have here is Ruud. I found 260. I'm going to take it, but we faded Djokovic in Geneva because we didn't like his current form. It worked out to our advantage, and we're going to try to do the same thing exactly by fading Djokovic and backing Ruud in the second straight tournament. Moving on to the second quarter, you have what should be more open. Getting into the actual favorite for this one, you have Zverev as the favorite at around plus 125. You have Medvedev at 5-1, Rune at 7-1. You have Nadal at 9-1, Struff at 10-1, de Minaur at 14-1, and Khachanov at 18-1. Navone, a friend of the podcast, at 25-1. Kaboli's 40-1, another friend of the podcast, and you have Greek Sport at 40-1 as well. Darderi's at 50-1, Makic at 65-1, and you can go through some names here. Shout out to a name we've not heard in a while, though. Carreño Busta is actually playing in the event. He's 100-1. I'm not picking him to do anything in the event, but shout out to him for actually being healthy and for being alive. I haven't heard his name in months at this point, so good to hear from him. Hopefully, he'll be able to put together a respectable showing. Point is, though, nice to see his name on the list, and hopefully he ends up not embarrassing himself out there, because Busta's a good player, and it's nice to see him actually back in action. But to get into the quarter picks here, Zverev, I do think, is the best clay court player in this quarter. Of course, not including Nadal at 9-1, but we know Zverev's a decent favorite in the first round. Probably would have thought he would have been a bigger favorite, but money's come in on Nadal because he has looked very good in the practice sets that every player kind of has before the tournament. So we'll see if Nadal's body can hold up. Maybe it can for 3 to 5 sets. Probably not much after that, but we'll see if he can upset Zverev in the first round. That's kind of why I'm staying away from Zverev. I'm kind of intimidated by him facing off against a Nadal in the first round. It's never a fun prospect to take a guy to win a quarter in a Grand Slam when he's against the guy with the 4th lowest odds to win the quarter, or to actually, to beat him in the first round. It just seems like a crazy draw for Zverev when he's plus 125 to win a quarter. I'm not saying Nadal's going to beat him, but can I see Nadal potentially pulling it off? Sure, why not? It's one round. I think that Nadal's body can hold up for hopefully 3 to 4 hours, and we'll see if that's enough to win it, but I'm going to fade Zverev. I just think that plus 125 when you're facing off against the 4th lowest odded person in the quarter is a terrible price. So I'm not going to take it. I think that's an insane number. So I'm going to fade him. Instead, I'm going to go with 3 players in the mid-tier range. Once again, shop around. You can find different lines. Give me Rune at 9-1. I'm going to go with Khachanov at 18-1, and I am going to go with de Minaur at 24-1. I think Struff can be interesting at 10-1, but I really don't like the odds at 10-1, so I'm going to pass on that. But Rune, we know, is a very solid clay player, and I do think that he can have a pretty respectable showing here since his draw is not that difficult, and I think that he can make it into the round of 16, and we'll go from there. But 9-1 for a solid clay player. The issue is going to be fatigue, always with Rune. It seems like his body will betray him more often than not, but the point is 9-1 I do like as a price, and I do think that he has the upside of potentially making a semi. I believe the last 2 years he got matched up against Ruud in the quarters, I think. I'm pretty sure it was the quarters back-to-back years. So Rune's had the misfortune of having Ruud in his quarter, and as a result, he's lost. But the point is he has been able to get by other guys, and I do think that it's a pretty favorable draw for him, and I think the quarter is actually pretty decent for him. So I don't mind 9-1 for Rune as the first choice. Second choice, Khachanov. I know he's decent on clay. Clay's definitely not his best surface, but we also know Grand Slam Khachanov is alive and well. He's a guy who seems to always play his best tennis on the biggest stages, and he has made the semifinal multiple times in Grand Slams over the last few years. So it's mostly just backing him at 18-1 for being a very good 3 out of 5 set tournament guy. We know Khachanov is very capable of playing consistent level tennis for a long period of time, and is usually good enough to actually make respectable runs. But 18-1 for a guy that I think can have a very solid showing is a pretty good price. So I'm going to go with that at 18-1. de Minaur is mostly just based on disrespect for his line. I understand that recently his form has not been amazing, but I do think that 24-1 is disrespectful for a fringe top 10 guy. And I do think that based on his overall skill set, he can definitely make it interesting, because we know that de Minaur has been very good recently against Medvedev, for example. So if there's a matchup there, I actually like de Minaur's chances. But I think de Minaur at 24-1 is mostly about the line being disrespectful. And I think that de Minaur is too talented to basically ever be listed 24-1 with Zverev as the favorite in the section. I think de Minaur should be closer to like 15-1, in my opinion. So it's mostly a value play. Give me de Minaur as a long shot at 24-1 as my third pick in the second quarter. So we kind of are expecting Armageddon in the second quarter, and hopefully we end up getting that as one of our long shots might have a shot at actually winning the quarter. Moving on to the third quarter, we have the opposite. We have a favorite that I think is actually worthy of being a favorite. You have Alcaraz at minus 130. You have Tsitsipas at plus 275. Rublev at 7-1. Shelton at plus 2,000. Felix at 2,800. Humbert at 2,800. Court at 3,500. You get the point. Alcaraz, I know, has battled some injuries recently, and I feel like that's the main concern you have for Alcaraz. It would be his durability. Now, Rublev did just beat Alcaraz a couple weeks ago, and Alcaraz, we know, was not exactly at 100%, but Rublev played very well. Lost the first set, then he ended up dominating the final two sets. But we know Rublev can be very inconsistent. We also know that he's never won a quarterfinal match in his life in a Grand Slam. He's 0-for. So he's never actually made it to a semi, and I'm not going to pick him at 7-1 to do it the first time. Tsitsipas is a clown, so I'm not going to pick him. I know that he can make a deep run. He made the French Open final a couple years ago. I don't trust him, especially at plus 275. So it's kind of Alcaraz by default here at minus 130. If he's healthy, he'll make it. And I think that it's a good overall draw for him. So give me Alcaraz at minus 130 as my only pick for this quarter. And for the last quarter, you have Sinner, who is kind of the same price as Alcaraz. He's around minus 140. For the other options, you have Hurkacz at 9-1, Jari at 12-1, Dimitrov at 12-1, Tabilo at 12-1, Baez at 16-1, and Tiafoe at 25-1, which is a laughable price, by the way. Tiafoe should be like 40-1 based on current form. Norrie's 25-1, Shapo's 35-1. You get the point. Now, unlike Alcaraz, there actually are, forgot to mention, by the way, shout out to a fun player who's in the third quarter who has no chance at winning, but I'm going to give him a shout out because I gave Busta a shout out before. Nishikori. Shout out to you. You're actually in the French Open. Hopefully Nishikori wins a round or two. Nice to see him, and hopefully he's able to put together a respectable showing. But Nishikori's in the field, so good for him. Anyway, back to the fourth quarter. Decent amount of talent here with Hurkacz, Jari, Dimitrov, and even Tabilo and Baez in the same quarter. Now, Sinner has also had some injury issues, so we'll see how he holds up. But we know Sinner, when healthy, is really, really, really good. I think he's still the best player in the world right now, and I think I'm going to take him as the favorite here. I just think that he's a very solid player. Now, it's a similar story to Alcaraz, where I feel like if health is not a concern, I just think he's winning, just simply put. I think that he's definitely more talented than all the other guys in this quarter. But unlike the Alcaraz quarter, you actually just have a bunch of talented clay players. Now, Jari, I will never really take because I just don't trust his consistency, and his shot selection, I think, can be abysmal at times. Hurkacz, we know, has gotten better at clay. Is he a great clay player? No, but he's improved. And Dimitrov is a pretty decent deal at 12-1, but we do know that Dimitrov's up there in years, and we have seen him kind of choke in some spots where he's had golden chances to make respectable runs in Grand Slams. Baez, I do think, is a very good clay player, but I do think that his lack of serving ability or serving talent is going to come back to bite him against some of the better players in this quarter. And Tabilo has been solid as well. Tabilo might be a fun sleeper option, but Jari, Dimitrov, and Tabilo being at 12-1 apiece, I feel like one of those is off. I think based on reputation, Tabilo should be higher. I think Tabilo should be closer to like 15-1 in my opinion. But the point is, I do think based on the overall odds here, I think Sinner is going to win the quarter, but I am going to throw in another guy just in case Sinner's injury acts up again. Give me Hurkacz at 11-1. I know Dimitrov's been good against him in the past, but all those matches have been wars, and Dimitrov might lose before that. But Hurkacz has a decent path in his first couple of rounds, which I do like. 11-1, though, I think it's a decent price. Is he going to get to the semi? Probably not. I'll admit it, he's probably not going to do that, but I do think 11-1 is a decent price for basically a top 10 guy. So give me Hurkacz as my long shot in the quarter, but I'm mostly going to go with Sinner at minus 140. So once again, my picks for the French Open quarters here on the men's side. First quarter, I'm going with Ruud by himself, fading Djokovic at plus 260. And we also just won a title and won us a plus 333. So we're basically free rolling him to win the quarter, which hopefully he does at 260. Second quarter, though, we're expecting chaos. We're going to fade Zverev. We're going to take Rune at 9-1. Khachanov 18-1, and de Minaur at 24-1. Third quarter, pure chalk. We're going with Alcaraz by himself at minus 130 in a very, very easy draw, in my opinion. And the last quarter, we're going to go with two people in the fourth quarter. Give us Sinner at minus 140 and give us Hurkacz at 11-1. Now let's actually get into the quarterfinal picks to win the entire event. Alcaraz is the favorite around plus 260. Djokovic is plus 330. Sinner's 450. Zverev 7-1. Tsitsipas is 850. Ruud is 12-1. Rublev is 25-1. Nadal is 25-1. Medvedev's 30-1. Rune is 40-1. Davila is 80-1. Jar is 80-1. Struff is 100-1. Paul's 100-1. Fritz, Hurkacz, Dimitrov are all 100-1. De Minaur's 130-1, and you get the point. Now, I mentioned it before. Nadal and Djokovic have owned this event for the last couple of years. I'm not picking Nadal. That's a given. I'm not picking Djokovic. That's a given. This might be one of the more open Grand Slam events that we've had in a long time. Probably since the, I'd say, Zverev and team U.S. Open final in the middle of COVID. I know they were fortunate that Djokovic got ejected because of the ball boy incident, or the line judge incident. But the point is that tournament was kind of up for grabs because half the field couldn't make it because of COVID. And I feel like this event's going to be very up for grabs. We've seen a lot of, I don't want to say chalk, but a lot of similar faces winning Grand Slams over the last couple of years. Yes, we know Sinner and Alcaraz have broken through to win theirs, but it's mostly been Djokovic, and we've seen kind of the usual suspects win every time. This year might be different. We'll see what happens. Sinner finally won his first Grand Slam title in the Australian Open. We'll see if he can continue his winning ways here in the French Open. But people might finally expect Zverev to get over the hump. Maybe Tsitsipas, maybe Ruud, Rublev, pretty much anybody in the top 5, top 10, not named Djokovic, Alcaraz, or Sinner. People are expecting or hoping to have a solid run. And to go through the actual players that I'm picking, I'm only picking one of those guys. I am going to go with chalk. I am going to go with Alcaraz at plus 275. Yes, I know that injuries have been an issue for him for the last year or so, but I do think his draw is very easy at minus 130 to win the quarter, and I do think that he's in a good spot to potentially, facing off against Sinner in the semifinals is nuts, but I do think that Alcaraz is well equipped to handle the clay. He hasn't played in a couple weeks. Hopefully that allowed him to get healthy, but I do think that he's in a good spot to kind of cruise into the semifinals, and it's good enough for me. Give me Alcaraz at plus 275. For the second choice, I am going to go with Sinner at plus 450. When healthy, I think he's the best player in the world. His record speaks for itself. And I think the draw, even though it's not the easiest, I do think that he's capable of getting the job done in relatively convincing fashion because of how good he is. He looked very solid in the clay season, and then he got injured in one of the last matches he was in, but we saw him have good showings in Masters 1000 events. I'm encouraged by that. Give me Sinner at plus 450. And I am going to go with a longer shot, or I should say a guy that has made deep runs before, but never been able to finish the job. Always a bridesmaid, but never a bride. Give me Ruud at 12-1. Now, Ruud has been able to make the final in back-to-back years, and I do think that after winning a title in Geneva, maybe confidence-wise, he's figured it out. But we know Ruud in 3 out of 5 sets on clay is very, very difficult to beat. I do think that it's pretty obvious he is a top 3, top 4 clay player in the world. I think Alcaraz is up there too, and I think Sinner might be there as well, but people don't want to fully admit it. Nadal's not going to be there in the top 4 right now, just based on injury concern. Djokovic might be, but might not be because he hasn't won a clay title. Point is, though, I do think that taking 3, in my opinion, top 4, top 5 clay players in the world is worth consideration. And I think 12-1 for a repeat finalist is a very solid deal in what I think is a decent quarter because Djokovic has been underwhelming. So that's going to be my long shot pick here at 12-1. So once again, my outright picks for the French Open, I'm going to go with Alcaraz at 275. I'm going to go with Sinner at 450, and I am going to go with Ruud at 12-1. That's going to wrap it up, though, for the actual outrights. Now it's time for the lock and dog picks for the first round. Before we get into any of that, do want to remind you once again that we are brought to you buy Rhythm because it's the NBA playoffs and you can bet on player props, and Rhythm can help you do that because Rhythm is very, very convenient to use, and it gives you a menu of the best player props for every single playoff game, making it easy to go through and to find the best player props to put your money on in seconds. Rhythm's predictions are backed by over 3 years of data, and a team of data scientists and quants help focus their algorithm to help give you the best chance at winning. Rhythm pairs its predictions with player prop graphs to help you feel even more confident with your picks, which you can make either in DFS formats or in regular betting formats. From superstars to bench players, Rhythm has a lot of player prop lines, all backed by AI data without you needing to endlessly scroll a sportsbook. Rhythm allows you to create your own NBA models, so you can get AI-backed money line, spread, and total picks for each playoff game. Start a free 7-day trial and start winning your NBA player props with Rhythm. Available wherever you do get your apps. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished going through my outrights for the ATP French Open. Now it's time for the lock and dog pick. Starting off with the lock on the show, I am going to go with a 2-pick parlay. Very chalky legs, but pretty standard. We're going with Sinner and Alcaraz to each win in straight sets, and that pays out at minus 129. Sinner is a minus 4,500 favorite against Eubanks, who's been atrocious, and Wolf is really not a great clay player either. And Alcaraz being minus 10,000 kind of sums it up. But the point is getting both those guys to win in straight sets. I think it's a good combo deal. At minus 129 is a good bankroll builder. Eubanks and Wolf are not good on clay. Eubanks has lost 11 of his last 12 matches. I called him overrated after his Wimbledon run last year. I really don't think he's that good. And he's been terrible so far this year. So I'll fade him. I know last year he ended up winning a set off Rune, but I do think that Sinner is obviously the much more talented player. Great server, great returner. If Eubanks' first serve percentage dips, I do think he's going to be in serious trouble, and I do think that Sinner will be able to win this one in straight sets. Wolf, though, has lost 4 of his last 8 clay matches. All 4 losses were in straight sets. Also lost in the final round of qualifying. He got buried by De Jong, I think. So the point is, he actually is a lucky loser. He should not have been in the event, and he got gifted second life, but he's against Alcaraz. So Wolf, I do think is a bit one-dimensional, solid forehand, pretty underrated serve, but I just don't think he has enough overall clay talent to challenge Alcaraz by any means. So I am going to go with the 2 favorites here to win in straight sets, Sinner and Alcaraz at minus 129, which I do think is a very good price. Moving on to the dog, once again doing a same game, doing a parlay, but this time instead of the 3-0, we're going to bet on a bit more turmoil and drama in these 2 matches. We're going to go to the over 3.5 set market, and we're going to take 2 matches that I think should be competitive. We're going to go with Mueller and the Mueller versus Nardi over 3.5 sets parlayed with Caboli and Medjedovic over 3.5 sets, and that 2-pick does pay out at plus 111. So Mueller and Nardi actually faced off against each other about a month ago as they faced off in Monte Carlo. Match went to a deciding set. Mueller and Nardi are going to be standing on the baseline the entire time, exchanging, and I do think you're going to see a pretty streaky performance from both guys because that's kind of the summary of their careers. So I see a long match, maybe a 5-setter, but I do think that over 3.5 sets is a pretty safe option in what should be a very competitive match. I don't see either guy winning in straight sets, so give it to me. And I do think that's a very good parlay leg. As for Caboli and Medjedovic, stylistically, pretty similar in the sense they have a lot of firepower, and they're also willing to just unload behind the baseline. I think it's going to be a very competitive battle. We saw Caboli have a match point against Ruud on Saturday. Very solid player, beat Shelton on clay earlier in that event. But the point is, Medjedovic, we saw get through qualifying. I like him a lot. I do think that he's a very solid player. Mentally, he can implode on occasion, but I do think that looking at both guys, I think each guy's too talented to lose in straight sets, and I do think that you're going to see some back and forth, maybe a 5-setter, maybe a breaker or 2, but I do think that each player is solid on clay. Each player is solid in general. Give me a competitive match between the 2 of them. So once again, the picks for the show on the men's side. For the lock, we have Sinner to win in straight sets, parlayed with Alcaraz to win in straight sets, and that pays out at minus 129. For the dog, we're going to go with Mueller and Nardi over 3.5 sets, and Caboli and Medjedovic to go over 3.5 sets, and that 2-pick does pay out at plus 111. A reminder that we also have a lock and dog pick for the women's episode, so we have a bonus lock and dog there, so check out that episode if you do want my extra picks for the first round. Until next time, though, we're back once again for the second round of the French Open. Until then, though, find me on Twitter at Reichel Radio. Find me on the NBA show. Find me on the MLB show. Find me on the WNBA show as well. Until next time, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.